our July webinar, which is Putting Yourself First in Estate Planning. And we have two speakers today. We have Kathleen Summers, she's our nurse attorney and lead attorney, and attorney Tiffany Kudrovitz. She is our associate attorney here at Generations Law Group. I'm Carol Anderson, I'm the marketing director and your host for today. We have thinking about our legacy and what we're going to leave behind for our loved ones, but sometimes that may not be the only part of estate planning. So Tiffany, why don't you get us started to tell us how we can put ourselves first?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Carol. Thank you everyone for joining us today. It's nice to see some familiar names and faces on the screen, and we look forward to working with all of you. I'm fairly new here, but it's actually an exciting topic to do because we were talking about what is estate planning and what exactly are we trying to accomplish with estate planning? And it led us to thinking, well, what is actually really important in life? Is it leaving lots of money behind, or is it living your best life and then seeing where everything falls into place? And that's what led to this webinar. And so we thought we would start by asking the question, and this may be something you all want to have feedback on right now, but is how do you define legacy? So oftentimes when you think of legacy, especially in estate planning, and especially when you're talking to your lawyer, what pops into your mind is, what money am I going to leave behind? What is the inheritance? I'm going to leave $1 million. Am I going to leave something? Am I going to fund college for my grandchildren? But a lot of time, legacy, especially again, dealing with a lawyer, it's something that's very financial, and it's not really thinking about you and what you value. And so we're encouraging you to think of legacy in a different way, which is, what is the legacy, meaning the impact or the memories? Like, what do you actually want to leave behind? And that may or may not involve money or a house or sort of the standard, what you would think of as legacy. But that might actually just be memories, like baking cookies or going to the park or playing basketball on holidays. Your legacy, when you are putting yourself first in estate planning, might be living your best life and the values that you pass on. So everything that we're talking about today, we don't want you to be thinking of it as, I'm going to live my best life, but I'm going to leave something concrete and material behind. We want you to think of it as, how am I going to have this legacy that I leave behind that is actually something where they get warm, happy thoughts, or they think of time spent, as opposed to, oh, well, she died and she left me lots of money. You know, you don't want that to be your legacy. We want it to be, I really enjoyed the time and I learned more about history or nature because of this person. So that's a long-winded way to say, think about what is really meaningful to you. So perhaps when you're putting yourself first, you'll come up with a new definition of legacy. And we thought of an example that's not specific to estate planning that might help bring this into context. And a lot of us have met with financial advisors, which is something that we also recommend that you do as part of your full plan. But if you're talking to a financial planner, they'll say, okay, what are your goals in life? What is the life you want to live? What are you saving money for? And a lot of people, especially young professionals, or as you get just a little bit older, you'll say, well, I have kids and I want to put my kids through college. And a financial advisor will often say, okay, that is a really wonderful goal. But have you thought about yourself and maybe what your retirement looks like? And so they'll actually encourage you to say, okay, why don't you prioritize your retirement and living your best life and travel? And then you can also, like if you want to, you can save for college, but your kids will probably be fine. And that's something you can think of with estate planning. You know, you can't recreate that beautiful legacy, those memories. That is set in stone once you pass away. Whether or not you pass away and leave money, you know, your family will work it out over time. So live your best life. So with goals, we're going to get into these more specifically. But with goals, there's a lot of things to think about, because some of your things that you leave behind are going to be based on what you're looking to accomplish. and you might have health issues that you're navigating, and you might have sort of a work-life balance you're working towards, or you might be retired. So a lot of these things on this list that you'll see here are things that you should take into consideration, but we're going to give you ideas moving forward on how you can work those goals into an estate plan where you're actually the primary person, and then everything else will fall into place. So I think Kathy's actually going to talk to us a little bit more specifically about why you should put yourself first.
Well, thank you, Tiffany, and thank you again for everyone joining us today. Tiffany's absolutely right. You know, when we talk about estate planning, oftentimes the focus is on what happens after you've passed away. But we truly believe that focusing on what happens while you're still alive to ensure that your quality of life, your choice is understood and that it's respected during your lifetime is absolutely critical. I oftentimes think about when you get on an airplane and they tell you to always put your oxygen mask on before you take care of anyone else around you. That is absolutely the way that we believe you should approach an estate plan. You need to make sure that you're taken care of, your spouse, if you're married, is taken care of, and then take care of everyone else afterward. So let's talk about a little bit about, why you should put yourself first. Certainly, thinking about issues like care of yourself during your lifetime. What is that going to look like? While we're healthy, able to make decisions for ourselves, we're in control of our own healthcare issues in particular. How do we make sure, though, that should we get to a point in our lives where we are not able to make decisions for ourselves for a number of reasons, that we have identified somebody of our choosing to be able to step into our shoes and make those kinds of decisions. So we're going to talk a lot about, caring for ourselves, how to make sure that we have a community, that we've used the time again, while we're healthy, while we're capable, while we're in control, to identify what our care community looks like, who would we rely on, who would be our important decision makers. Doing this kind of planning, make sure that you get to maintain control, even if you're not in a position of being in control. That's because you've identified who's going to step into your shoes. You've given them the appropriate authority, whether it's through a power of attorney or healthcare related decision-making documents, to be able to step into your shoes successfully. And you've had important conversations. That's going to be a critical part of this discussion today, is having those critical conversations with your decision makers, with the people in your life, to ensure they understand the framework for decision making should they have to step into your shoes. It's also important that people understand your charitable decisions, your charitable intentions, if you have any, the things that, again, are important to you to support during your life, so that these, not only while you're capable of supporting them, to be able to go out and do the things that you want to do in terms of if giving back to your community, giving back to specific organizations is important to you, but you also want to make sure that that's clarified and understood during your lifetime, again, should you not be in a position of fulfilling that for yourself. I think Tiffany talked really beautifully about the idea of passing on, what is a legacy, and understanding that that is something that you build and create during your life, not just a monetary amount that is maybe left to beneficiaries after your death, but it is so much more than that. And you have an opportunity to really add richness to your own life as well as those around you by really focusing on more experience, things that you can do, things that you can share, passions that you have during your lifetime. And then, certainly with an estate plan, we do look to do, certain planning, such as making it easier for them after you've passed away. And that we don't want to lose in all of this, but we do not want it always to be the number one priority. What's going to happen after your death? How do I make sure taxes are saved for my loved ones? Those things are important, and I don't want to lose them in all of this. But you, and a focus on you and a spouse, loved ones in your life who are dependent on you, really needs to be part of the overall picture of estate planning. So why don't we talk about areas of your life that affect your estate plan? And again, I don't know, Tiffany, if you want to jump in here to talk about some of the things, looking at retirement, looking at lifestyle community, or you would like me to go ahead and take that off, I'll begin and then ask you, Tiffany, to jump in if you will. When we're talking about, again, putting yourself first, one of the things that you always need to think about is, again, that larger picture. While you're healthy, while you're capable of being able to manage decisions for yourself, you do want to think about, what does the next step look like? So you may be living still in, your large family home with, 3-4 bedrooms, that type of thing. What does the next step look like? And when do you want to make that step? These could be big things that people need to consider. Making this step when you're in your 60s and 70s is a lot easier oftentimes than taking and making that change when you get into your 80s and or 90s. The ability for us to adapt to change is a little bit easier when we're a little bit younger. But thinking about, maybe your decision is, no, I am going to stay in my 3-bedroom home. Well, then how do you go about affording that home? You want to take a look at things financially to make sure, again, that you're able to maintain that lifestyle that you're choosing to have. What do you need to do maybe to modify that home? Do you have to look to bring the laundry up to the main living area because it's been in the basement all these years, and possibly avoiding those stairs is going to be something that makes it so you can live in that home for a longer period of time. So this is a chance to be able to take stock in terms of where you currently are, what you see as potential barriers to staying where you are, if that is in fact what you want. Or if you say, you know what, I want something else, to start exploring now. What does that look like? What does that something else look and feel like? What kind of community would you be comfortable living in? Are you looking for an assisted living community, one that has, an area for independent living for yourself, but has potential help right outside the door? Things like, group meals, community meals, community activities. Are you looking more for some kind of second home somewhere that you want to go? Let's say you've always loved the ocean, or you've always loved a lake, or that type of thing. What kind of change are you looking to make? And how do you make sure that that change also will support eventual changes in your life and ability as you age? And this is how, again, putting yourself and your needs in the forefront as you're making these decisions is so critical to ensure that those next steps are successful for you. So taking a look right now, what do you need in terms of a financial standpoint, working with an advisor to find out, what do I have to have financially to make sure that I can maintain the lifestyle that I would like to have? Or if my finances aren't really lining up with my goal, how do I start to begin to adjust my goals a little bit so that I can support my desires as I age? Looking at your community, looking at your current housing situation, and taking this time to think about what a next step would look like. We used to say pre-COVID, great time to go out, visit all of the different communities that are out there, enjoy a meal that they may be offering, because so many of them would have activities to encourage people to come in and see. Some of that we're starting to see happening again. But certainly the landscape has changed a little bit. And the pandemic has changed many people's thinking. For some, it has said, you know what, that type of community is not what I want because of certain reasons. For others, they have said, the pandemic has made me feel more isolated, and having that kind of community is really important to me. We do a lot of work with what we call individual agers or solo agers as well. And a lot of that kind of thinking and planning applies to all of us, because, whether we have family and support around us, or whether our family and support may be at a distance or non-existent, we can create a community as well where we are. and thinking about and starting to learn about what types of benefits are out there. Things like Minuteman Senior Services and Bay Pass Senior Services, Springwell are all, state organizations that have many, many services as we age to help us, successfully age where we are. And so looking to find out what our communities have and creating that sense of community for ourselves, identifying who's going to be there to help us as we are aging successfully is critical in terms of putting ourselves first in our estate plan.
And linking this back to the why, it's how Kathleen mentioned that communication is so important, because as you're navigating all of these decisions, as you're exploring, as you're going through the pros and cons of retirement or living, it's the exact type of conversation you would want to have with those community members. Because if it's something that only you know, or you don't share, or something you're extremely passionate about, for example, if you really want to age at home and you're putting things in motion to make that happen, you absolutely need to make sure that your family members and the decision makers know that. So everything sort of ties in together. So while we're asking you to think about it, you absolutely want to communicate that to other people so that they can help if you are not able to make those decisions while you're alive, that they can help you fill those dreams and those goals that you've come up with.
Excellent. So talking about some of the important people that are in your life, again, this is the time to start identifying. As Tiffany said, you've got to identify who your group of support is, who your family, friends, the important people that you're going to rely on as time goes on, and communicating who those important people are. They talk a lot about the fact that, writing down a plan is very, very important, because this is a way for you to solidify it for yourself, as well as, Tiffany talked about in terms of making sure there's a communication, tool, whether that is something that's in writing, whether it's a verbal, but you want to memorialize this in some way so that people understand. And we're going to talk about the important decision makers that you need to be identifying. And, healthcare, certainly, we'll talk a lot about the importance of those healthcare decisions and who's going to be in those positions for you. Handling your finances, that can be a power of attorney, trustee, many different aspects of who might be involved in planning your finances or helping with that. Clarifying your end of life wishes. Not a fun thing for many of us to think about, but a critical one. One that we want to make sure that, as in life, that we live the life that we want. Also need to think about, at the time of death, how do we want that to play out? If we are in a critical situation, what types of decisions give a framework for our healthcare decision makers to understand what is critical to us at that point if we're not able to control that aspect of things ourselves. And as Tiffany has so clearly outlined, the upholding your legacy. What is your legacy? And making sure that that is followed and honored up until the last breath.
I think it's also important to clarify that the important people in your life may or may not be the decision makers. So the important people in your life, it might be your neighbor, or it might be someone at church, or it might be actually your family. But when it comes down to deciding who's going to act on your behalf, which we'll get into in the next couple of slides, the important people, you might have a broad, really supportive community of people who support you, who, if you had an emergency, you could call your neighbor, or you could, if you needed socialization, someone who would meet you for lunch. But it's important that you have that entire community, not just the people who are making the decisions. And that way, if there's ever any issue, if someone is making a decision on your behalf, and there's maybe something that they don't know for sure, they could say, I know that she was really close to her neighbor, and she might have some idea, or I know, just so that you know, when we're talking about important people, we're not just asking you, like when we sit down and we say, okay, who's important in your life? Where do you stand? Give us some background. We're not specifically saying, who is your power of attorney? Who is your healthcare proxy? We want to know the full circle so that you're getting we're not just getting answers for you, but that's part of the legacy and the values, is knowing that there's more than just a person on a piece of paper. And oftentimes, if your family lives far away, they might be who you would want to make decision, but they might not be your first person, just because if they live in California and you need a healthcare decision now right here, it might be someone else. So we just want you also to have a broad definition of who is important, and remember all the people who support you and who love you and who you love. And think they might not be recorded on paper, but that doesn't make them not important when you're thinking of your estate.
I think that's critical. And Tiffany, you talk about that. And I think as estate planners, we often think about just the documentation, or when people think about a estate plan, they think about just the paperwork. But I think that our view of estate planning with our clients is, we're in a position of honor, quite frankly, that we get to really meet our clients and understand that their lives are so much more than just the paperwork that we might create for them. People have such incredibly rich backgrounds and lives, and everyone is so incredibly unique that as estate planners, it's quite an honor, because everyone's estate plan is so very individual. We have some basic things we put together, but the truth is that the plan itself is very, very different for everybody who we have an opportunity to work with. So why don't we talk about healthcare in your estate plan? Because again, one of the reasons why this is such a critical area is, first of all, it is one of those places that if you're not able to make decisions for yourself, we want clarity. We want to make sure that we understand who your healthcare decision makers will be. And we want you now to be able to give them the framework to have that conversation with them about what is important and critical for you. A couple of things, though, in terms of the communication with your healthcare decision makers, and as Tiffany said, sometimes even with a broader group, is you want to make sure that people know, or at least know where to find out that what's that relationship that you have with your important healthcare providers, and who are they? Establishing that now. I can't tell you how many times I have people who have said, well, I have a personal, a PCP, but I have not seen them in X years. It's important that as we age, that we develop relationship with healthcare providers that we have confidence in, and that we have a relationship that they have a knowledge as to who we are and what's important to us. And so making sure that you're taking time again now to develop that important relationship with healthcare providers and with elder law attorneys. We're going to talk about financial people too, that it's important that you create those types of relationships, because in an emergency, in a crisis, you want to make sure that these people have an idea of who you are and what's important to you. Another thing that's really, as you're looking to put yourself first, is you do need to make sure you're understanding your own healthcare needs. That you're recognizing and taking responsibility. This is a hard thing. I think about my own in-laws, and as they aged, the difficulty sometimes with the willingness to accept help, to allow people to come into the home. These are all parts of keeping yourself first by making sure that you're open to assistance when you need it, that you're open to some different maybe approaches to things, and not putting roadblocks in the way yourself of your successful aging and of ensuring that your plan is a successful one overall. Certainly making sure that you've done your actual healthcare related documents, as we talked about, getting your healthcare proxy in place, your living will, and that HIPAA authorization and release form, so that we know who the important decision makers are should you not be able to make your own healthcare decisions. And having that conversation, making sure that you clearly communicated what your wishes are. I know Carol put in, I think, the chat box, we have a couple of books that, ebooks that we have created that might help to give you some guidance on having those important conversations. to be able to, sit down and talk with your loved ones about what's critical to you, should you be in a healthcare situation in which you can't make your own decisions.
Similar to with your healthcare planning, we want you to consider your financial part of your estate plan as well. And that would could involve a financial planner, your lawyer, an accountant. And ideally, you would have people that were sort of working together and sharing information so that your financial plan wasn't just a singular piece that was like the attorney set up the trust, the financial advisor's doing something, your accountant's just maintaining the paperwork. You want to make sure you have a relationship with everyone, so everyone is working on the same team towards your goals. So with finances, it's important to identify the people similar to making healthcare decisions who are going to act on your behalf. And in doing so, it's difficult because you might pick a professional, or you might pick a loved one, and they might have different goals, because a financial advisor might be more conservative and say, well, I'm managing the money and this is what I think we should do. And I know, there's holidays and birthdays and stuff, but they might, if they were advising you, say, let's hold off a little, let's preserve some money. Whereas a loved one might go in all heart and say, oh, we love holidays, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to go all out, we like charity. And the important thing on both ends, and I'm just stereotyping, but the important thing on both ends is whoever you decide is going to make financial decisions on your behalf, you want to have that conversation with them so they know when they are acting on your behalf that this is exactly what you want to do. Your life goals are, to have the family time, to give the gifts, to contribute maybe to 529s. They're acting on your behalf. So you want to make sure you communicate whatever that is, so that whether it's a financial advisor or it's a family member or a friend, they're all acting the same. So if you had a conservative approach, you want to keep it that way, you want to preserve money, they're acting that way. If giving to family, saving for college for your grandchildren, whatever you think is important, you want to communicate that. So when you're looking at someone to act as your power of attorney or as a trustee or personal representative, it's important that they know what's important to you. So the power of attorney, we typically think of it as it's your attorney in fact. So they're handling legal, financial type things. So your power of attorney, for example, if you needed to be admitted or signed into a nursing home and there's paperwork involved, they're gonna help with that. But your power of attorney will typically have other powers. And I was just mentioning gifting, for example, and you want them to know where do you want gifts to go? Kathleen had mentioned before charitable giving. Is that important to you? Let them know, I like to give to these charities. I like to give this much. I want that to be part of my plan. So you want someone who is a good listener, first of all, to be in charge of your finances if you can't handle them. You want someone who's also good with money, so they can balance out, okay, these are the wishes and this is how we're going to handle the money. Someone who's honest and compassionate, sort of just like a good balance. Think of exactly how you would act and all of the qualities you have when you're managing the financial side of your estate plan, and how you would want someone to act. So the power of attorney is, again, it's going to be while you're alive, someone who's helping fill that role. And then the trustee and the personal representative will be after you pass away, whether they're administering a trust or whether things are flowing through your will. You want someone, because they can't ask you for any clarity at that point, it's set in the document, but you want someone who's going to read that and say, okay, this is what they wanted, this is what we're doing. And anything that's discretionary, if there's any judgment to be made, you absolutely want that person to be thinking back to you and to communication you had while you were alive, like right now, so that it's matching the priorities that you set. So even especially with a trust and with a will, even though you've set the stage for how it's going to flow, you still want them to be having your best interest in your heart and your mind. And you don't want them to lose sight of that when they're acting on your behalf. So doing all of this, it's the same with healthcare. you by making the decision now and picking the people and communicating with them. That's prioritizing your wishes as opposed to someone else guessing how it should go when you can't have a decision making or a say in it.
So I think one of the things that we want to make sure that everyone is hearing is that putting yourself first in your estate plan is not selfish. It is ensuring that you are expressing your wishes, sharing what's important to you, keeping quality of life, quality of choice, those things that each of us should have as part of our aging process as the primary forefront of our health, of our overall estate plan. We want to make sure, again, that we put our own oxygen mask on before we take care of those around us. So making yourselves the center and the priority of your estate plan is not a selfish act. And in fact, it can actually really enhance the legacy that you leave to your loved ones after you're no longer here. Showing them how to make sure that self-care, taking care of oneself while ensuring that the quality of their life and the quality of the life around them is affected the way that you want it to be is absolutely critical part of your estate planning. All right, well, I hope this was helpful. And again, really enjoy the fact that everyone has, taken some time. Thank you so much for participating in this. And I hope it's given you some help and direction as you're looking to put your own estate plan and yourself first as you move forward.